Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.
Welcome to Overtime with Dr. Michael Jacobs. I'm Chip Franklin. As we talk about what's on everybody's mind right now, I guess, is Colton Cowser. And we were talking about that with What's the Doc segment. And that's why I wanted to bring this up here. But I guess the thing I was trying to think about is that it seems to me, like you were saying, and others have said, the hands, these real fragile little things we have here are the key to hitting, obviously, because, you have to be able to hold the bat and be able to make a statement with that, keeping your hands back, the whole drill. It really worried me when I heard that about him. And how many careers have you heard ended prematurely because of hand injuries?
Well, as I said, if it's in the shaft of the bone, it should heal fine. If it's in the joint, it could be a problem. To me, it clearly affected Markakis. I don't think he was ever the same hitter after he had his hand smashed by Sabathia, and I'm sure it's happened to other hitters. In today's world of analytics, hitting techniques vary. Everybody's well aware of the Jim Rice incidents where the young hitting coach told him he didn't know much about hitting. Now, Jim Rice, if you've ever been close to him, has the biggest forearms I've ever seen on a human. And he obviously had hands of steel. So he can hit with his hands a little more than somebody who's leaner and lankier and doesn't have those kind of enormously strong hands. So it really varies as to which hand is important depending on your hitting coach and how you go. Obviously, if you're a Charlie Lau guy and you kind of dive into the ball and drop your top hand, you're going to hit different than somebody else. I saw, if you like to watch old videos, there's a great old video of Mickey Mantle talking after his career about how he always went into a slump after the All-Star game in the 50s. And he said, I hated the All-Star game because every time I would go there, Ted Williams would sit down next to me and say, Mickey, when you bat righty, is your right hand your power hand? And when you bat lefty, is your left hand your power hand? And when you switch from side to side, you change how you do it. Mickey would look at him and go, Ted, I just swing as hard as I can. I don't think about it like that. And he said after the All-Star game, his head would get scrambled by thinking of all the things Ted Williams would say. And it always reminds me of the smart kid theory of, I'd have colleagues and friends who are geniuses, and they have these genius kids, and they would try to say what a great school the kid went to. And I think, guys, your kid's smart. He's going to be a star wherever he goes to school. It's not the school, it's the kid. And it's the same thing with hitting. Some people have the bat, find the ball, and some don't. And Alan Mills was saying that he was following a kid at Fort Lauderdale High School after he was retired. And one of the analytics scouts came down, and I think it was from the Orioles, frankly, really wanted to draft on the kid because all his analytics looked great. And Alan said, if you watched him play, he can't find the baseball, And so sometimes you just got to look at how the player's built, how his mental picture of the ball works, and everybody's so unique. You just can't pigeonhole them like that.
Roger O'Dare, who was a physicist, wrote a book called The Physics of Baseball. And he said a bunch of really interesting things. And one of them was about Henry Aaron, who was 6 foot, 180 pounds, and of course hit over 750 home runs. And I met him and shook his hand before too. It was like he was a mechanic on airlines or something. It was really amazing. But then I look at Mullins, who hits 2 home runs in a game. How tall is Cedric? What, 5?
He's short.
Yeah, 5'9".
He's not just short. He's not short like Ray Rice, who's short and thick. He's short and not really a big man, but he's clearly got strong. Look, shake hands with Buck Showalter. He's got little vice grips for hand. He'll play golf with Buck. He has a short little swing and hits these low darts that go 250 yards.
Yeah.
So you can be short, but still have very powerful hands. And Mullins obviously does.
It is interesting to look at. We were talking earlier too, also about the injury. One of the Orioles pitchers, the starter, whose name I'm gonna butcher, whose hand he had to leave the game the other day because he got a cramp in his hand. And we were talking earlier about just how hard players squeeze the baseball. I have a ball from 1964 Major League Baseball, and the threads, the stitches were much higher than they are today. They're much flatter. And so I would imagine it was easier to throw a curveball back then, and maybe less impact on the arm. What is the one pitch that actually causes hitter to have the most arm damage? Is it because some of these guys, Hugh Darvish has 9, 10, 11 pitches that he throws. Is it they don't throw screwballs anymore because they can get the same effect with a changeup, like a circle change. But what is the one pitch I think that does the most harm to the arm? Is it the fastball?
No, once again, everybody's different.
Yeah.
Uh, we've gone through a number of pitchers who developed or fell in love with a split or split change or a Vulcan split change, who had short fingers and were somewhat on the stiff side. And it became their out pitch. And they, when you're a pitcher and you have an out pitch, you get somewhat addicted to it. But they kind of threw it because they were stiff and had small hands. They had to jam the ball way back and they kind of pulled down with their elbows and their elbows fell off. Okay. Then we had Lee Smith, who threw that pitch probably 60% of the time and never had an injury. And I was talking to Lee, who's a fantastically smart person, particularly baseball-wise. And of course, Lee's got to be 6'4", 6'5". He's got these NBA-size hands. He's got
one of the top 4 relievers of all time.
He's got his fingers this long, and when you examine him, he's double jointed, so he can almost put his wrist all the way back. I said, how come you throw all these splits and it never hurt, Tracy? Lee says, I don't know. He goes, I just put the ball back here. Of course, with his giant hands, it just slides all the way back like he's Connie Hawkins. And he said, I just throw a regular pitch, and when I get all the way out, I just flip my wrist. Well, if you've got fingers this long and you're double jointed and you're real loose jointed, and you've got long arms, you can flip that split with your wrist and it doesn't bother your elbow. So you've got to work your pitch selection to what your anatomy is. And it always helps in pitching to be loose jointed and get all that leverage. But the problem is if you get too loose, then your arm starts to slide out the front and then you can't pitch anymore. If you remember Bryn Taylor, the 1-1 pitch, I think the year Ramirez got drafted in 91, got into some sort of bar fight with his brother, dislocated his shoulder, and he never was able quite to regain that power pitch. So you've got to match the talent to the physique, and that's the magic of coaching. And that's, to me, where being 100% analytics in your coaching can be a problem, because you really have to match it to watching a guy throw with a more traditional pitching coach. The analytics guys will probably say, well, we're measuring wrist angles and fingernail length and all this stuff, and we're trying to incorporate it, but there's no substitute for watching a guy throw and saying, I think this is a good pitch for you.
I had an opportunity to hear Jim Abbott speak once. He does these motivational speeches. For those that don't remember, Jim Abbott is the one-arm pitcher that threw that no-hitter for the Yankees. And he was talking about taking care of your body. And he would say, I got to take care of my arm because I don't have enough, and he was really, really an interesting man. And my son was with me. And I think the thing that really blew us away was his mental toughness. And the mental toughness can actually help you not get injured. Obviously, if you are mentally tough and you can do the work you have to do to get you to that point, because we all know this, it's hard in February or in November to not eat have that extra beer or that extra piece of cake or whatever, to be mentally tough, to be thinking about 6 months from then in the 9th inning or wherever you are, and you have to make an athletic move and you're ready for it. And that's, is that kind of taught? Is there somebody on teams they have that kind of works with guys on the psychological obstacles they're going to face?
All of the teams have performance people to do it. I was thinking of writing a little primer book about it, because to me, it's hopelessly overrated. It all comes down to one thing, which is confidence. You've got to feel comfortable knowing you can get the job done. And it's always been my theory that the most elite athletes are arrogant and irritatingly full of themselves, thinking they're better than they really are, even when they really are great. And they have to be like that to throw a 3-2 splitter with the bases loaded. You just can't do it. I think I've told you this before. And my sister was a high-level tennis player. She was the same age as McEnroe. So I used to watch him play 15 and 16-year-old tournaments when I would drive her to tournaments. And he's not a big guy. He's not a very impressive physique. He's not a particularly quick guy in terms of sprinting. And I would watch him hit these outrageous low percentage drop shots, and you'd say, that's a ridiculous shot. He would make them 70% of the time because it never occurred to him that he wouldn't make it.
Right.
And you can't teach that. You can make players better. And I always to think about analytics. You can make maybe a AA player, a AAA, and a AAA, a 4A, and a 4A maybe a utility guy, but you can't make anybody a star. That just comes from within you. I guarantee you at the end of their careers, Cal Ripken, Carl Yastrzemski, I remember, made the last out in the 79 playoff game with the Yankees, the Bucky Dent game. Even though those guys may have been towards the end of their career, when the game was on the line, they all thought they should be the guy up. You can't teach that.
No.
You just can't teach that. But you can try to get players more valuable. And to me, it's the job of the coaches with the performance people to instill in the players that kind of confidence. And you just can't teach that. The stars are the stars. You can't change that.
Well, you'll see that. And the guys that just won't accept losing, you know, there was a stat that used to bounce around baseball about batting averages when the games were out of hand. The guys that, like BJ Surhoff, for example, had, when his team was way ahead or way behind, his average didn't dip at all. He was super consistent. The kind of batter that you knew was always going to be a tough out. The last guy, like Jeter, Jeter's a great example of that. You know, he'd find a way to beat you, and you kind of felt it. And it was kind of the pinstripes, but it was also Jeter. You know, I think Jeter would have been that guy. He played for the Tigers or the Reds. You know, he was just one of those kind of guys. All right, I got to ask you this last.
I got to follow up on that. Actually, the king of that's Pete Rose. I saw him on an interview after he retired, and it's commonly said that the difference between being a 250 hitter and a 300 hitter is like one hit a week. It's not that big a deal. And Pete Rose said, I never give up an at bat. We may be up or down by 20 points in the ninth inning. I never give up an at bat. And that is certainly how a player like Pete Rose, who obviously is the hit king and is a super talented player, but he's not Willie Mays, he's not Hank Aaron, how he went from being a great player to the hit king by never giving up an at bat. And you, like you said, that's just self-driven.
Well, last year, I think 3 major leaguers had 200 hits. Rose averaged 200 hits a year for 20 years. That's insane. All right. This next question is awkward, and it makes me sad because I really like the kid. Jurickson Profar tested positive for PEDs this week, and is going to miss 80 games. And I got to ask you, what are these guys thinking, Doc? I mean, how do they think they can take these and get away with it?
Well,
and is there a real advantage?
You've got to be careful in this world of what you say on podcasts.
But
you have to look at the reality.
Okay.
He came out of nowhere last year to have a ridiculous year. And you might be suspicious that there was more going on there. And maybe if you snuck by it one year, you thought you could sneak by it another year. I mean, there's nothing you can say. They know they're being tested. And Profar, who is a major league talent, maybe not to the level of last year, but he certainly is a major league talent. I wonder why somebody who's that good to start would jeopardize a career by taking it when he was already there. I can see it. If you're a French player running out of options, you got nothing to lose. But I don't understand why you would do it when you're already there. But, you know, back in the steroid era, I can tell you, it was true of us and other teams. Guys are coming out of the Mexican League who couldn't get a job 3 years prior, and suddenly they're throwing 94, 95 miles an hour with big splitters. So it's a desperation move to me if you've got nothing to lose. I don't know how his agents and his team would allow him to do that since he was so successful last year. He had nothing to prove this year.
It just breaks my heart.
That approach
makes me sad because
has he appealed it or is he done? Can he argue that it was I didn't know what I was doing?
Well, he has the 80-game suspension. So my gut is is that lawyers spoke and they decided on that, or maybe the league is just hard ass and just came down and said, this is it. You tested positive, boom. I just saw the news headline last night, and I live in San Diego, and we got to see him a lot, and he was great with the kids after the games, and just always a big smile on his face, diving for baseballs. The prototypical perfect player to have on your team. Everybody liked him. When he came to the back to San Diego, he's playing with the Braves now. They gave him a standing ovation for about a minute and a half. It was really impressive. I don't. It's just it's hard. To me, it's heartbreaking. But I understand that it's a grind. This sport. 162 games plus spring training with injuries and everything, and the pressure of having to play through, as you mentioned before, an extra little seeing eye grounder a week can make a difference between a 250 player and a Hall of Fame career, right? That's a famous scene in Bull Durham when he's talking about that, ground ball with eyes, and it's just one of those things about baseball that we all love. I'm such a fan of the sport because I've been close enough to it and played it to understand exactly the difference between a major leaguer and, somebody like me who just loved it and wanted to play it at a higher level, but you would never would, and we all see these kids growing up, and I just, the steroids, not to mention it's a carcinogen, right? It's not good for your body, right? Your internal organs and all.
It's a controlled substance. That's a whole nother topic. But
Right.
as
I
I said,
understand.
really sad. He seems to be a wonderful person. He had a great year last year. Maybe he felt you'd have to ask him if he felt he
Right.
couldn't live up to the year again. Maybe he was driven to fulfill the product that they were paying him so much money for. Now he's obviously not being paid. It's very sad, and I don't know, like I said, why an established player would do that who is not hanging on by his fingernails, which, like I said, if you got nothing to lose, what are you going to say? Hey, if you're interested, I'm going to be out of baseball anyway. Let's give it a throw. But I just don't understand how his team could allow him to do that. That just seems a bit odd to me.
Yeah. I guess, the, and this is outside both of our bailiwick, but about with gambling. And I think about Rose not being in the Hall of Fame. And you mentioned him earlier with all the gambling that they're allowing now and what's happening in sports. It seems kind of weird that they're going to keep Rose out, a guy who, personified every other thing about baseball that we love. It's going to be
Well,
interesting. And I think about with the steroid guys, it's someday, it seems to me like you're either going to, I don't know how you can keep them out because learning more and more about people that have done things to help them. There's no doubt that Barry Bonds would have been in the Hall of Fame without steroids, right?
I have to tell you, I am strictly anti-steroid. I'm keeping Roger Clemens out and all those other guys. Okay.
Well, Roger Clemens is a prick, but other than that,
I don't know him personally, but I'm keeping those guys out because, again, he and Bonds didn't need it, but they did it. Uh, I'm not going there with steroids. I'm just not buying it. As for the other stuff, our society is such a sellout to money. I'm disgusted by all pro sports. These players are getting these crazy salaries, which the owners are paying, so be it. But I'd like to see them mandate salary cuts so that people can go to ball games. I gave $5 seats at the Orioles are about $110 each to sit in a decent box seat. If you take a family of 5 to a ball game, buy a couple tickets and hot gold, just $600,
yeah,
$700.
you're right.
That's outrageous, and I
Does
don't want to hear.
Otani really need to make $1 billion?
We should bring everything back to the fans. Starting World Series games at outrageously late hours where you're too tired to watch them. Extending seasons where you could run into snow if you're playing in Minnesota, or if Toronto has an outdoor, or Montreal goes back to Jerry Stadium. And the whole thing's a sellout to me. And then the players want to play few games. And if you cut the season by 5 or 6 games and they get a 3% salary cut, they're refusing to take it when they're making zillions of dollars. So it's a whole societal money grab that has made sports turn into entertainment. And it's not like going to a Colts game in the 50s where you spent your $10, you saw John Unitas, a high school band marched on at halftime, and then the game started, and you weren't inundated with rock music blasting through the stands and whatnot. I went to one Ravens game in a box. I never won again because it wasn't football to me. It was just entertainment. I'd rather watch it on TV at home and not deal with all the blasting. So it's just a societal change that you can't reverse in my point.
I think a lot of people listening to you are nodding their heads like I was right there. Doc, always great to see you, my friend. Great insight. And of course, we can find Dr. Michael Jacobs every week on the Bmore Baseball podcast and on Overtime as well. I'm Chip Franklin, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.
Have a great week, everybody.
Do you know who I am? I'm kind of a big deal.